On day 47 of the Israel-Hamas war, we have some breaking news and some developments here. You may have seen on the news already that a deal has been agreed to send 50 of the hostages that Hamas currently holds back to their Israeli side. And of course, some of those are supposed to include some Americans. It's certainly the hope it is. Now, while that's certainly good on the surface of it, there are some bigger issues that fall, and it's clear to understand from the beginning. This does not mean the end of the war. It doesn't even mean a ceasefire per se, but it does have at least a near-term hope. And we want to talk a little bit about that today and give you a little bit of a deeper dive to understand what the meaning of this hostage release is, what the ramifications are, and the difficulties that still lie ahead, both for Israel and the United States. First of all, I want to show you a little bit of a clip of what happened on the Israeli side, because this deal was not as easy as it may have appeared. And there was a lot of opposition on the Israeli war cabinet itself to even agreeing to this. But it finally did. Here's how it went down.
Intense negotiation overnight. We didn't hear from the Israeli cabinet till the early morning. There was some opposition. Talk us through how the vote finally came through.
Started later on in the night, and it took more than 6 hours, not just for the vote, but debating, because you had many members of the cabinet that was against this deal right from the start. You had the National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, as well as the Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, who have been dead against it. They said that all of this time they've been warning Israel against any kind of not just negotiations, but before this, clamping down on Palestinians. And they said that this could allow more prisoners to be released, prisoners they said that should actually be receiving the death penalty, because that is what Itamar Ben-Gvir has been pushing for in the last few months. So a lot of political wrangling. But interestingly, Smotrich, the finance minister, he changed his mind. His party changed their mind. Initially, they went in saying absolutely this will not go through, we will vote against it. And then they voted for it, saying that they realized, having debated it, that it was in the national interest for Israel and to ensure the return of those held hostage, which is not just the only goal. The war isn't just the only goal against Hamas, but also those captives.
Now, let's look a little bit at those captives, because we often take a look at the bigger picture and in the geostrategic ramifications, and we're going to do that here in just a few minutes. But I also don't want to miss the fact that, especially on this holiday of Thanksgiving, there's going to be some reasons for some individuals to have a great deal of Thanksgiving. And let's not minimize the potential tremendous positive impact this is going to have on the family of 50 of these hostages.
Around 50 of the women and children taken in the October 7th terror attacks. 3 Americans are expected to be released in the first group, a senior administration official says, including 3-year-old Abigail Moridan, her family hoping she'll be home for her birthday on Friday.
She's turning 4, and to just imagine that she comes home and is with her family is our light right now. In such a very dark and terribly horrific period.
Here in Israel, urgent phone calls to families. The mother of 21-year-old Mia Sham, last seen in a Hamas propaganda video almost 5 weeks ago, praying she'll soon see her daughter in person.
How are you feeling this morning, Karen?
Shaking since the moment I woke up. It's like a Russian roulette. We are waiting to see who will come back home.
President Biden thanking mediators in Qatar and Egypt and Israel's Prime Minister, who pushed through the deal in a tense government meeting where he insisted a brief truce would not end the war. And just yesterday, fierce fighting. 250 airstrikes, Israel says, ahead of the initial 4-day humanitarian pause starting tomorrow.
You know, one of the things not mentioned in that report there is that the little 3-year-old Abigail, that was her aunt that you saw in the video there. Actually, her parents were both killed on October 7th, and it's unknown whether she's even aware of that. So it's going to be, well, a very bittersweet moment if she's, in fact, one of those that's released. But that just goes to underscore the terrible human toll that this war continues to have on everybody. And as that last part of that report just showed, and as well as the comment on the first report we had there, the war continues going on. And this is a humanitarian pause. It's a cessation of fighting for long enough to get the hostages exchanged. It is not the end of the war. And unfortunately, there is a lot more fighting to go on. And Gary, if we can bring up that map that shows just the level of destruction, and also the map of the country. As you can see in the northern part there, all those orange spots are things that have been destroyed. And you can see a massive amount of Gaza City has been completely obliterated. And we've shown you a number of the scenes where you see some of the buildings themselves, and it's just a moonscape. It looks like parts of Hiroshima in certain areas of the city, meaning that the place is not even going to be livable. Now, as you can see in the left side of that map that we had there, is that there's still a whole lot more fighting to go in the south part, south of the Wadi Gaza there, which is kind of the midpoint. So all these million people have been moved out of the north and have been moved into the south. And that is where Israel expressly says is the next area on their target list. So they're going to continue to go into areas now where there's even more dense of population. So imagine if it was as dense as we've heard with 2.3 million in this small strip to begin with. Now then you've concentrated nearly all of them in the southern part, and that's the next on the Israeli target list. Benjamin Netanyahu continues to say that his objective is the destruction of Hamas. And he's going to continue to take whatever action he deems necessary to get that done. And as we've seen already, that means that tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians are likely going to be killed and wounded. And it remains to be seen whether the global Western world or the Arab world are going to tolerate that, because the support in the West has been significantly fraying. I think that's probably a significant reason why the Israeli cabinet members who were against the hostage release finally relented and said yes, because I'm very confident that the U.S. administration put a lot of pressure on them to do that very thing. Because if they were seen, the Israeli military were seen as being uncaring even about the Western hostages, even about their own hostages, that could further fray the level of support without which Israel can't continue to wage this war. Now, unfortunately, even that's not all that we have to worry about, because this war still has the possibility of expanding. We have the U.S. forces in the region, in Iraq and in Syria. Ever since October 17th, about 10 days after the start of this war, we have been attacked in many different places in Iraq and Syria. You can see on the map here, these are all the locations to where there has been attacks on American people, on our troops in the region. And this is just part of the story right here. We have, there was another attack yesterday where this time the United States actually had an AC-130 gunship in the air, which took out the people who were trying to attack the United States. But what is clear, there have been 3 airstrikes against either the Iranian-backed groups themselves or against the Iran-backed areas where they're holding ammunition and other storage facilities. And it's clearly had no impact on deterring them from attacking more, which means more are going to continue to come. And it's one of the common themes we have on our show here, that the lives of the Americans that are in those areas there in Iraq and in Syria are basically just sitting in the desert with targets on their back, wondering if any of these attacks are finally going to drive home and an American will be killed. And of course, at that point, there will be enormous pressure on Biden from the likes of Jack Keane, from the likes of Lindsey Graham, many others in Congress that will say, we need to teach Iran a lesson and we need to go after the IRGC in Iran, etc. And of course, then that has all kinds of opportunities to spill the war over and now draw us actually into the fighting, as Iran almost certainly will retaliate because they have a lot of opportunities to do that. Unfortunately, that's not the end of it also. Now, it's been less in the news in many places, but also down in Yemen, there has been lots of fighting recently. They have fired cruise missiles, actually, all the way from Yemen up to Israel. So far, those have all been intercepted. They have now taken to capturing pirating ships in the sea that they at least claimed was owned by Israel. Israel says that that particular ship they took wasn't, but they've taken them hostage and said it had an Israeli flag on it. And apparently they're going to continue to do that. In the northern part of Israel, there is the Hezbollah has been continuing to ramp up its attacks. And in the northern part there, you can see on this current map here, each of those spots represents the attacks of just yesterday. There were 17 more attacks from Hezbollah into the north part of Israel, and that is putting enormous pressure on the Israeli government from the Israeli citizens in that impact zone, that they're demanding that the IDF take preventive action and actually launch into a war into the northern part of Israel, into the southern part of Lebanon. And again, that could also spawn the war into an unknown territory. It's unclear if, for example, Turkey, our allies, we talked about on this show with Doug McGregor just yesterday, or any of these other groups in the area, Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq, they could take a more proactive attack, especially if we end up hitting more of their people or this thing spirals out. There are so many things that are at play here, in so many ways this could go sideways. It's great that we celebrate the victory, that we are going to get some of these hostages back, but we cannot lose sight of the fact that this is a much bigger, much more volatile situation than many are aware of, and that we have to do everything in our power to protect the civilians in the Gaza Strip, to recognize that the innocent civilians that are trapped inside Gaza are just as valuable, just as important as the innocent Israeli civilians who were murdered on October 7th. The United States government has to put more pressure on the Israeli government to take a much more refined military operation designed to find the specific Hamas fighters and members of that group that were responsible for 10/7. Absolutely. There's no one should say that the war should stop. We are saying that Israel has to be much, much more refined in how they go after it. This is not merely a humanitarian issue. This is not merely a moral issue, though it is both of those things. As I vehemently argue, it should be a high priority for the Israeli government not to kill anyone that's innocent. But it's also a very practical political issue. The Israeli government, if they want to maintain the support of the West, and if they take that for granted, they may find to their consternation that it is not a permanent automatic thing. It could be weakened and it could collapse. It's also not a wise thing to assume that Erdogan in Turkey is just blowing smoke, that he's just making a lot of blather, but it intends to take no action. Or that some of these other groups, that Yemen will not succeed, that Hezbollah will not attack south. It is a bad assumption to assume that all of those things will continue to go on, irrespective of what Israel does, even if they continue with the same sledgehammer top operations when they go into the south and continue killing Palestinians in large numbers. Those things are absolutely vital for this war to end on anything that's approaching peace for Israel. And as we talked about again, and I want to reiterate here as we approach the end of this session, Israel has to define what its end state is. The United States has to define what our end state is. It can't be enough to just say we're going to destroy Hamas. Who knows what that even means? Because it's almost impossible to discern, to identify who are the Hamas fighters and who are, these Palestinian men, the millions of them that live in the Strip, and even some in the West Bank. But how do they distinguish between just an angry Palestinian man who's mad because his house was destroyed, that half of his family got killed, and a Hamas person who is responsible for 10/7? How do they distinguish between those things? And at the end of the day, will they come to a situation where there is ability to have peace for Israel and a justice for the Palestinian people? Right now, I don't see that Israel's on a path to do that. I see that Israel's on a short-term myopic path to just say, let's kill all the Hamas people, whatever it takes, with no thought given to what comes next. And if you don't give thought to what comes next, you could end up with something far worse than what you have right now. We're going to continue to monitor this for you. We're going to continue to bring you the deep information and the context that is so vital to understanding what's going on right now. And we will remain unintimidated and uncompromised in bringing you the truth. That's all we have for you today. We hope you have a nice Thanksgiving with your family tomorrow. And God bless you all. And we will see you next on Deep Dive.